I was staring at my computer screen. Heart pounding, hands frozen on the mouse. Watching the website go live. A website that didn't just represent work, but exhaustion, pride. And a month of my life I would never get back. It wasn't live on my test server where it belonged. It was live on his server. And when I opened my FTP client to delete it, to pull back the thing I still technically owned, 3 words appeared that made my stomach drop. Access denied. In that exact moment. Before a single phone call was made. Before a single email was sent, I already knew the truth. I was never getting paid. And this man had just made a decision that would eventually cost him everything. This story goes back to the early 2000s. A time when the internet still felt lawless. When Google was young, rules were flexible. And very few people truly understood how search engines worked. Back then, I was a freelance front-end developer. But that title didn't really capture what I did. My real skill, the thing that paid the bills, was search engine optimization. SEO wasn't mainstream yet. Most people thought ranking on Google was magic or pure luck. It wasn't. It was strategy, structure, and understanding how trust flowed across the web. Link exchanges were popular at the time. Everyone was swapping links, building shady networks, taking shortcuts. I never touched that garbage. Instead, I had something far more powerful. A single website with absurd authority. It was directly linked as a trusted resource from one of the most respected websites in the world. That one link made Google treat my domain like it could do no wrong. Anything I linked to from that site instantly gained credibility. Rankings didn't slowly climb, they jumped. New sites outranked old giants. Businesses exploded overnight. I guarded that power carefully and only used it for my best clients. Then Bob showed up. Bob ran a travel business selling vacation packages. On the surface, he looked successful. He talked big, dressed well, and constantly mentioned major clients and important partners. His website, however, told a different story. It was outdated, ugly, barely functional, and clearly built by someone who didn't understand usability or performance. Bob didn't just want a redesign. He wanted a full rebuild. A complex system with dynamic content, back-end logic, booking features, and custom functionality that went far beyond a simple brochure site. I could handle the front end without breaking a sweat. But this project needed serious back-end work. So I hired a developer I trusted. Someone skilled, reliable, and just as invested as I was. Bob also had a deadline. A big one. He had a major launch scheduled exactly 1 month away. No flexibility. No excuses. It had to be done. Normally, my process was strict. I took a 25% deposit up front. No deposit, no work. It protected me, filtered out bad clients, and kept everyone honest. When I explained this to Bob, he refused immediately. He said he'd been burned by a previous developer and wasn't risking another cent before seeing real results. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and spoke like someone who was used to getting his way. Every instinct in my body told me to walk away. My gut was screaming. Something about him felt off. Too confident. Too dismissive. But reality has a way of silencing instincts when bills are due. This was a large contract. Serious money for me and the back-end developer. Money I needed. Money that would change my situation at the time. So I did something I almost never did. I trusted him. We made a deal. No deposit. We'd complete the entire project. Bob promised, very clearly, that he would pay in full before the site went live on his server. That was the condition. He agreed without hesitation. Looking back, that should have scared me more than reassured me. From that moment on, my life disappeared into code. For an entire month, we worked relentlessly. Days blended into nights. Coffee replaced sleep. Weekends stopped existing. We debugged issues at 2 a.m. Rewrote entire sections days before launch. And pushed ourselves harder than we ever had. There were moments when we thought we wouldn't make it. Moments where exhaustion made even simple problems feel impossible. But we kept going because missing the deadline wasn't an option. And somehow, against all odds, we finished early. One full day before the deadline. The site was complete. Polished. Functional. Powerful. It was honestly one of the best projects I'd ever been part of. I remember leaning back in my chair, exhausted but proud. Feeling that rare satisfaction that only comes when you know you've done something exceptional. I was genuinely excited to show Bob. Excited to finally get paid. Excited for everything to be worth it. The next day, I sent Bob the link to the test server and waited. He called me shortly after. His tone was calm, almost friendly. He said everything looked great. He praised the design. Complimented the functionality. Then his voice changed. He said he was worried his server's PHP version might be too old to run the site. I assured him it would work perfectly. I knew the requirements inside and out. But Bob wasn't convinced. He said he was too scared to pay before seeing it run on his own server. We went back and forth. I explained the agreement. He pushed harder. He insisted the site had to be uploaded and tested on his server before he'd pay a single penny. I spoke to my back-end developer. He didn't like it either. None of us did. But after a month of work, after everything we'd put into it, we convinced ourselves it would be fine. Bob sent the FTP credentials. I uploaded the site. I messaged him and told him it was live. And then, nothing. No replies. No calls. Emails went unanswered. Phone calls went straight to voicemail. A sinking feeling settled in my chest. I rushed back to my computer. Opened my FTP client, and tried to delete the files from his server. Access denied. He had locked us out. The very next day, Bob's website officially launched. Using our work. Every line of code. Every feature. Every late night. Stolen. And that's when I finally understood what kind of man Bob really was. I spent the next several days calling Bob nonstop. Morning, afternoon, evening. Every call went straight to voicemail. Emails were ignored completely. No replies. No excuses. Just silence. That silence was louder than any insult. Because it confirmed what I already knew but didn't want to accept. He wasn't busy. He wasn't fixing an issue. He was avoiding me. He had taken the work and decided I wasn't worth paying. Each time my phone went to voicemail, my chest tightened a little more. A slow, burning pressure built behind my eyes. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about disrespect. About being treated like I was disposable. Like my time, my skills, my exhaustion meant nothing. I replayed every conversation in my head, every warning sign I had ignored. The crossed arms. The dismissive tone. The way he talked about other developers like they were idiots. I should have walked away. I knew that. And knowing you ignored your own instincts hurts. Almost as much as the betrayal itself. Then, one morning, Bob finally answered. His voice was calm. Too calm. No apology. No hesitation. No attempt to explain. I barely had time to speak before he cut me off. "Listen," he said, annoyed. Like I was interrupting something important. "I'm not ever going to pay you. And there's nothing you can do about it." Then he hung up. No argument. No negotiation. No room for discussion. I stood there holding the phone long after the call ended. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Rage doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in. It crawls up your spine. It makes your vision narrow and your thoughts sharpen into something dangerous. For the next hour, I paced the room, swearing. Replaying his words over and over again. "Nothing you can do about it." That sentence lodged itself into my brain like a challenge. As the anger burned itself out, something else replaced it. Cold clarity. I sat down at my desk and stared at the screen. Not knowing exactly what I was going to do. But knowing one thing for certain. I wasn't walking away from this. Bob thought I was powerless because he had the server. Because he had the site. Because he thought developers were just tools you could use and discard. He had no idea who he'd just stolen from. That's when it hit me. Not like a dramatic lightning bolt. More like a quiet realization. That spread across my mind and made me smile for the first time since the call. He had taken my work, yes. But he hadn't taken my skills. He hadn't taken my knowledge. And he definitely hadn't taken my most powerful asset, Google. Within minutes, I was checking domain availability. Bob's business name followed by one simple word, sucks. It was available. I bought it instantly. If his business was bobstravel.com, then bobstravelsucks.com now belonged to me. That purchase felt better than any insult I could have thrown at him. It felt like control returning to my hands. I wasn't done. I uploaded an exact mirror of his website to my new domain. Same structure. Same content. Same layout. Everything. Except now, it lived somewhere he couldn't touch. And then I did something Bob could never undo. I linked that site directly from my high-authority domain. The one Google trusted blindly. The one that acted like a ranking rocket booster. I knew exactly what would happen. It wouldn't be instant. Revenge like this takes patience. Google needed time to crawl, index, and decide. But when it did, the results would be devastating. For the next few weeks, I watched quietly. Day by day, my site climbed. Page 3. Page 2. Bottom of page 1. Bob's site sat above it at first, confident, comfortable. Completely unaware of the noose tightening around its neck. Then one morning, I refreshed the search results and there it was. My site. Above his. Not for one keyword. For all of them. Vacation packages. Travel deals. Destination searches. Anything a customer could type. My site came first. His was always second. And that wasn't even the real revenge yet. During that same month, I registered a second domain. This one was even more personal. Bob's full name. Followed by sucks. He had an unusual first and last name, which made it perfect for search domination. I built a simple site and posted the truth. What he did. How he refused to pay. Screenshots of emails. A clear warning to anyone thinking of doing business with him. Again, I linked it from my authority site. Within weeks, that domain outranked his personal website. At that point, I walked away. I didn't gloat. I didn't email him. I didn't celebrate publicly. I simply let the system do what it does best when you understand how it works. I forgot about it entirely. Life moved on. Other projects. other clients, other priorities. Until 4 months later, when an email landed in my inbox. It was a cease and desist notice, sent by a solicitor's firm demanding I take down both websites immediately. Threatening legal action. Threatening consequences. For a brief moment, I felt that familiar spike of anxiety. Then I did what Bob never expected. I Googled the firm. It didn't exist. Fake name. Fake address. Fake threat. I replied with a single sentence. The same sentence Bob had thrown at me months earlier. I'm not ever taking them down, and there is nothing you can do about it. That's when the emails started coming in. Customers. Victims. People. Who had paid Bob for travel packages that were never booked. Flights that never happened. Vacations that existed only on paper. I read every email carefully. And I posted every single one. On both sites. Making sure his company name and his full name appeared again and again. SEO isn't just about rankings. It's about association. And now his name was permanently associated with fraud. What Bob didn't know was that the travel industry is heavily regulated. Associations monitor complaints, patterns, warnings. And my site had become a public archive of everything he'd done. And someone was paying very close attention. At first, the emails came slowly. One every few weeks. Then one every few days. Then sometimes multiple in a single afternoon. Each message followed the same pattern. Confusion. Anger. Desperation. People explaining how they'd paid Bob thousands for travel packages that never materialized. Flights that were delayed. Hotels that were overbooked. Excuses that dragged on until the customer finally realized they'd been scammed. I didn't embellish a single word. I simply posted their stories exactly as they were sent to me. Redacting personal details but keeping every fact intact. And with every new post, Bob's online reputation sank further into the ground. What made it worse for him was how Google worked. My sites weren't just ranking high. They were dominating the narrative. Anyone searching his company name or his personal name didn't see his marketing anymore. They saw warnings, screenshots, victim testimonials, page after page of undeniable proof. His own website was still online, still trying to sell dream vacations. But it might as well have been invisible. Customers rarely click past the first result. And the first result was me. Somewhere during this period, Bob tried to fight back. I didn't hear it directly from him, but I saw the signs. New domains started appearing. Variations of his company name. Keyword-stuffed pages. Thin content designed to game rankings. It was desperate, amateur SEO. The kind you use when you don't understand how authority actually works. He was throwing money at the problem, hoping something would stick. None of it did. Authority beats volume every time, and he didn't have it. Then one morning, I received an anonymous email. Short. Angry. Poorly written. It contained a single link. A domain with my name followed by the word sucks. The message was simple: take your sites down and this one goes away. I almost laughed. I searched for the domain. It wasn't indexed. Not on Google. Not anywhere. No backlinks. No authority. No visibility. It was like shouting insults into an empty room and expecting the world to hear it. I replied with the same words he'd used on me, for the second time. I'm not ever taking them down, and there is nothing you can do about it. By then, the situation had grown far beyond a personal dispute. The travel industry doesn't ignore patterns of complaints. Associations track reports, monitor online discussions, and investigate businesses that attract attention for the wrong reasons. My websites, unintentionally at first and then very intentionally, became a central hub of evidence. People linked to them. Forums referenced them. Regulators noticed them. Bob didn't just have angry customers anymore. He had professional scrutiny. The call came a few weeks later. I almost didn't recognize his voice. The confidence was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. This wasn't the man who had laughed in my face and told me there was nothing I could do. This was someone scared. Someone cornered. His words stumbled over each other as he spoke. He told me the Travel Association was investigating his company. He told me people were calling him nonstop. He told me his friends were upset because his name was becoming toxic in their circles. And then, finally, he begged. Not asked. Begged. He said he'd pay me the full amount he owed. Not more. Not extra. Just the money he should have paid in the first place. He said we could put everything behind us. That we could be adults about it. I listened quietly, letting him talk himself into desperation. When he finished, I smiled. And for the third time, I used his own words against him. Listen, I said, calm and steady. I'm not ever taking them down. And there is nothing you can do about it. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could almost hear the realization sinking in. Money had always been Bob's solution. Pay it off. Buy it away. Make the problem disappear. And now, for the first time, he understood that money didn't matter anymore. He had lost control of the narrative. And there was no way to get it back. Over the following months, the fallout accelerated. Bob's company was removed from multiple travel associations. Without those memberships, credibility vanished. Suppliers pulled away. Partners distanced themselves. Customers stopped calling. His website still existed, but it was dead. Every Google search led to warnings and accusations. Every potential client saw the truth before they ever saw his sales pitch. One of Bob's former employees reached out to me during this period. He told me how hard Bob had tried to fix things. Dozens of new domains registered. SEO agencies hired. Endless money poured into trying to outrank my sites. The employee told me Bob couldn't understand why nothing worked. He didn't realize that only a handful of websites in the entire world had enough authority to beat mine. And none of his desperate attempts were among them. That same employee told me something else. Something that made the story even darker. Bob's business loans were tied to his personal property. As the company collapsed, the pressure didn't stay confined to spreadsheets and bank accounts. It reached his home. And that was only the beginning of the end. By this point, Bob wasn't fighting to save his business anymore. He was fighting to survive the wreckage. The travel associations had officially cut him loose. One by one, quietly at first and then all at once. Those logos that once sat proudly on his website, signaling trust and legitimacy, disappeared overnight. Without them, suppliers stopped returning his calls. Airlines refused to work with him. Hotels distanced themselves. In the travel world, reputation isn't just important, it's everything. And Bob's reputation had become radioactive. What made it worse was how public the collapse was. Every potential customer who typed his company name into Google was greeted by my sites. Warnings. Screenshots. Victim testimonials. The truth, laid out in cold detail. His own website still tried to sell dream vacations. Still used polished language and smiling stock photos, but it felt hollow. People don't book trips when the first thing they see is proof that others lost their money. Phone calls dried up. Emails stopped coming in. The silence that followed was the same silence he'd used against me months earlier. Only now it was crushing him instead. I kept receiving messages from people who had been burned by him. Some were angry. Some were embarrassed. Some were desperate, asking if there was any way to get their money back. I added their stories carefully, methodically, making sure every name, every keyword, every fact reinforced the truth. I wasn't exaggerating anything. I didn't need to. Reality was doing the damage for me. Each new post strengthened the authority of the sites and pushed his name deeper into the mud. At this point, it wasn't revenge anymore. It was momentum. Bob tried to adapt. He changed company names, tweaked branding, launched new domains. But Google doesn't forget, and neither does the internet. Every new attempt led back to the same place. My pages. My warnings. My archive of everything he'd done. Customers recognized the patterns. Regulators recognized the patterns. No matter how far he ran, his shadow followed him. One afternoon, I received another email from a former employee of Bob's company. This one was more detailed. The employee explained that Bob had been pouring money into SEO agencies, convinced that rankings were something you could just buy if you spent enough. Month after month, invoices went out, but results never came. Each failure made him more frantic. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Blame bounced from employee to employee. Morale collapsed. People started leaving. Those who stayed were terrified, watching a company implode from the inside. The employee also revealed something Bob had never mentioned. His business wasn't just failing. It was leveraged. Loans had been taken out against future bookings, against assets, against his house. The company wasn't just his income. It was his collateral. And as the business suffocated under bad press and regulatory pressure, the bank stopped being patient. Missed payments turned into warnings. Warnings turned into deadlines. Around this time, Bob called me again. Not to argue. Not to threaten. Just to talk. His voice was flat, exhausted, stripped of all ego. He didn't beg this time. He didn't offer money. He simply asked me to take the sites down. He said they were destroying him. He said he'd learned his lesson. He said he didn't know how to fix things anymore. I listened quietly, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel. Not guilt. Not pity. Just distance. Emotional distance. The kind you feel when consequences finally catch up to someone and there's nothing left for you to do. I told him no. After that call, I never heard from Bob again. Months passed. Then more months. Slowly, quietly, the signs appeared. His business entity was dissolved. His website went offline. The phones disconnected. The company that once sold luxury travel packages vanished without announcement or explanation. It didn't end with a dramatic headline or a public scandal. It ended the way most frauds do. With silence. Later, through a mix of public records and messages from people in the industry, I learned the rest. The loans had been called in. His property, tied directly to the failing business, was repossessed. The house he'd built his life around was gone. The men who once laughed and told me there was nothing I could do had lost the one thing he thought made him untouchable. It took just under a year. Less than 12 months from the day he refused to pay me. Bob's business went from profitable to non-existent. From respected, at least on the surface, to completely untrustworthy. From control to collapse. And the strangest part wasn't the scale of the damage. It was how little effort it actually took once the truth was exposed. I didn't chase him. I didn't threaten him. I didn't break the law. I simply let the internet do what it does best when you understand how it works. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel triumphant in the way movies make revenge look. What I felt was closure. A quiet sense that the balance had been restored. That the lie he built his life on had finally run out of places to hide. And there was still one final lesson left to be learned. When everything finally went quiet. When Bob's business disappeared and his voice stopped echoing in my phone. I expected to feel something dramatic. Triumph. Satisfaction. Relief. But what I felt instead was a strange calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm. You didn't start but were forced to stand in the middle of. For almost a year, Bob's actions had been a background noise in my life. A slow-moving chain reaction that started with one decision. His choice to steal from someone he believed couldn't fight back. Watching the chain reaction reach its natural end felt less like revenge and more like gravity doing its job. I kept the sites online long after his company collapsed. Not out of spite. But because they had become something bigger than Bob. People still found them. Still emailed me. Still thanked me. Some said they'd almost booked with him and backed out after reading the warnings. Others said the sites helped them understand they weren't stupid or careless. Just unlucky enough to trust the wrong person. That mattered more to me than the money ever did. By the time Bob offered to pay what he owed, cash had lost all meaning. What mattered was that he finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. Looking back, I realized something important. Bob didn't just underestimate me. He underestimated the nature of digital reputation. He thought a website was just code. A thing you could steal and get away with. He didn't understand that in the online world, trust is currency, and once it's gone, no amount of money can buy it back. He tried fake solicitors. He tried intimidation. He tried SEO tricks. He tried throwing money at agencies. None of it worked because he was fighting reality instead of accepting it. People often ask why I didn't take the money when he finally offered it. The answer is simple. At that point, it was never about being paid. It was about the fact that he thought he could erase his behavior with a transaction. That he believed consequences were optional if you had enough cash. Refusing his money was the moment he truly lost. Because it showed him that he no longer had control. He couldn't negotiate. He couldn't threaten. He couldn't buy his way out. All he could do was watch the world see him for who he really was. There's a strange myth that revenge corrupts the person who takes it. That standing up for yourself makes you no better than the person who wronged you. I don't believe that. I didn't lie. I didn't fabricate anything. I didn't scam anyone. I told the truth and made sure it was visible. Bob destroyed his own life. I simply refused to let him hide the destruction behind marketing and silence. The internet has a long memory. Longer than people realize. Long enough to remember who you cheated. Long enough to connect patterns others hope stay separate. Bob thought developers were disposable. He thought technical people were easy to exploit because they didn't have lawyers or money or influence. What he didn't understand was that knowledge is influence. And sometimes, knowledge is far more dangerous than power. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not don't mess with a developer. Even though that's the obvious takeaway. The real lesson is this. Never confuse someone's calm professionalism with weakness. Never assume that because someone doesn't shout or threaten, they can't respond. And never forget that the systems you try to exploit can turn on you. When someone who actually understands them decides to stop playing nice. Bob thought he won the moment he locked me out of that server. He thought the story ended there. But that was just the beginning. It took about a year to turn his cash cow into a dead one. Not through brute force, but through patience, precision, and truth. And in the end, all I really did was let the consequences he deserved find him. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been cheated, underestimated, or treated like you didn't matter, remember this: power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like knowledge. Sometimes it looks like waiting. And sometimes it looks like refusing to let the truth be buried. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button. Subscribe for more real-life revenge stories, and tell us in the comments. What's the most satisfying case of karma you've ever witnessed? Because as this story proves, the internet never forgets, and neither does justice.